Hello everyone, welcome to Dev Days Europe. This is our stage 6 and our second session for today. Service workers understand and use. It's presented by Stepan Suvorov, who is a CTO, a teacher, co-founder of StudyTube. He is a Google developer expert on Angular. He is organizing Angular meetups and groups. More than 12 years in JavaScript, and today he'll help us understand service workers and how to make use of them. A very practical session, and it will help with topics that we're dealing with on daily basis, at least some of us. So, Stepan, what are service workers used for?
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you very much for such detailed introduction. So probably I can skip already this slide that was already said. Only maybe some highlights that I want to do about myself. That I'm working at StudyTube as CTO for many years, and we have quite a heavy front end. That's why it's interesting to experiment, and that's basically how I come up with such topics like service workers. Also, one more thing to highlight, if you're interested in JavaScript or Angular, I have a YouTube channel where I provide content for free. And also important one, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer today, but if you have any questions after you rewatch this presentation, you're very welcome to ping me in Twitter. Here's my Twitter handle, and ask any question related to JavaScript, Angular, service workers, or maybe something else. And one more thing before we start, that's basically how I start now all my conference presentations, to highlight the topic that is very important to me because originally I am from Ukraine, and in Ukraine we had our one of our dev teams were there, and basically that's the picture illustrate one of our office buildings and how it looked before the war and after. So it's great that a lot of people around Europe support Ukrainian people. So moving to the agenda, how I see we're going to discuss service workers. First of all, we try to understand what service workers are. After that, we'll look how we can use it. Some standard or maybe not very standard cases. And after that, I also show based on Angular. It could be different framework, but because I'm Google developer expert at Angular, I'll present it in Angular how you can use service workers within your framework. So, what are service workers? And understanding service workers, I would like to ask more question, what service workers are not. And first, I would like to compare this confusion naming with web workers. What are the similarities? And if you look closer, you will see that, in fact, probably the naming or second part is only the same. You can run as many service workers as you want, but for service workers, you need to take into account that you can run only one service workers per your tab. Also, the thing that when you close your tab, all the service web workers are gone, but service workers are stay. So that's also important to keep in mind, especially for push notifications. So you close your website, but you can still send push notifications to your users. Also, we can compare service workers to different middleware that front-end frameworks use to somehow to intercept communication, HTTP communication between different client services and web server. In Angular, it is called Angular Interceptor, but different frameworks use different definition. We will compare it with Angular interceptors. Because from the first look, they are doing the same thing. They are in the middle. So if you know Angular interceptors, that's you create sort of class that implements the HTTP interceptor, and after you can be in between and do something with HTTP request you want and return back already like either request or response modified. So Angular interceptors or any sort of similar middleware in other front-end frameworks can be used in many different directions. So starting from authentication, caching, profiling, some logging, error handling, and so on. A lot of use. But looking close, what we have? We have our user, we have our framework. Inside the framework, we have service that is responsible for HTTP requests. Then we have our middleware. And then we have service workers in browser technology. And request goes to server. In this diagram, interceptors and service workers are easily interchangeable. So you either do step 3 or step 4, and you can achieve the same goals. But what can interceptors do or what cannot do? When we have HTTP servers, it will do only HTTP requests. But service workers will do any request that browser does. It's about index.html page itself. It's also about different asset files like JavaScript images or CSS. So that was not requested via Ajax, but Ajax as well. But in case of framework middleware, you'll be able to catch only Ajax requests that goes via this proxy. If you have a node plugin or something that is integrated into your framework that uses not the framework HTTP service, in this case, you will not be able to catch and modify the requests. That's an issue here. So, what are service workers? What do we know about service workers? That they are not working with DOM directly. So still, they help you to work with network. They actively use asynchronous concept. Also quite important to keep in mind that they work over HTTPS. They provide you reliability, performance, and push notifications. Moving forward to the use of service workers. First of all, to start, we need to register service worker for our page. And to register service worker, if we skip all the validation, whether browsers support it or browsers support service workers, we can register it easily with this simple line of code. sw.js is our service worker file that should be on specific location, obviously. And you can go to more advanced way of registering service worker and also specify the scope. In this case, it's a root scope, but you can specify instead of slash here different naming. It's quite convenient if you deal with versioning and for some reason you need to keep old version or you need to be sure that old version is not used, then you need to use scope. Here it's sort of hint that I will just leave here. If you try service workers and they doesn't work for some reason, it's mostly about HTTPS, so that's hints you can return there. Let's focus on more interesting part on sw.js. What is inside this file? So we already saw that to register, we write a line of code, call register method, and register this as sw.js file. What is inside sw.js file? We work with events inside service worker. So we need to understand what sort of events do we have. It starts with install, activate, message fetch, push, some experimental ones that I have no plans to highlight, but it's still in development and we can expect more methods. I'll try to show the most important ones for us. We'll start with install. Well, install, it's obvious, the method that happens, the event that runs when service worker is installed. You can add additional actions here during installation, and that's basically it. So, for example, you want to cache some files. And you use add event listener like everywhere in JavaScript. The same in service workers. You subscribe to install event, and after you can do your thing. Here I use also helper event.waitUntil. It's a helper to work with asynchronous events because add to cache method, I created a helper here that is asynchronous. So we will wait till these guys are cached. And helper looks like so. Add to cache. So here I use cache API. Not a lot of magic here. And after that, you can use this cache and output out of cache. That was installation. Next one, activate. And the first thing that probably, if you haven't worked with service workers, you want to ask, what's the difference between install and activate? And in fact, developers or creators of service workers, they decided to make a smart move and not to interrupt user experience of users that are working with specific version of service worker, specific version of application. You deploy new version of service worker, but your users will still work with old one. In parallel, new version will be installed. And when user closed or actively reload the page, only in this case, new service workers will be activated. So one more time, service worker is already installed, but the user can use only old version for quite a long time. And also you need to take into account that if you opened your application in several tabs of your browser, if one of those tabs is not closed, it means that service worker cannot be activated. Next one. Fetch probably the most interesting event, because it is exactly an event that helps us to control the network responses. And here, the same with help of event listener and with helper respond with, we can provide the data that was already cached. So few slides before, I showed how we can cache files during installation. And now we can use this cache data, and based on fetch request, with magic method match and providing request object, we can return cached file. It's super simple, I would say. By the way, here I also provided the link to documentation with Cache API to make it a bit more clear how match magic works. But I don't want to spend too much time here. Also, there is a message event for service workers. And message event, like a message bus, can help us to communicate between mainframe and service worker. When service worker is ready, we can use post message method and send some data. It could be just a text string or something more complex. And here, with, again, help of event listener, we read this message from event data, and we can send also back to the source with help of post message inside the service worker to the mainframe. And at the mainframe, again with event listener, we can read the message. Can be handy. Also interesting event that is not used very often is sync. In a mainframe, you can, for service worker, you can set up periodic synchronization. So you can say that during this interval, periodic sync with this tag will be sent. And inside service worker, you can subscribe to this synchronization and do specific action. For example, do something with the cache. Also, quite important, probably not less important than fetch, is push, that helps us to organize push notifications. Subscribing to push event is simple. It's the same as add event listener push. But the most complex part is organizing push notification subscription. And here I even made a separate topic for it. I found that it's not a lot of information provided on internet. So let's dive into it. What do you need to do to have push notifications ready for a service worker? First, you need to subscribe in your browser to get subscription object for a client. Then you can send the subscription object to the server. Server, if we want from server to send those notifications, after we need to store subscription somewhere, maybe in database. And when it's time, we can, for all the subscriptions in database, we can send a push notification. How it works in code. We have our service worker. And for service worker object push manager, we have method subscribe. It's also interesting that we need always to use method to property user visibility only true, otherwise it's not gonna work because of some security limitations that in browser we cannot do it fully in background. So we got our subscription object, and after we can maybe with simple fetch send our subscription object to store on the server side, somewhere in database. Okay, cool. And next, we need to implement server side. That servers save somewhere here. I simplified an example as much as possible to focus really on protocol side, not on implementation of database or something. So as you see, I use here Express engine to manipulate with subscription endpoint after I'm getting the body and storing it even not in database, but just in a file. Because for test purposes, we are operating with only one subscription, I decided it's enough to store it in a file and get it after. And the final stage is a broadcast. So, and for the broadcast, as well as for generating secret pair of keys, we are using here web push library. It is quite simple and super popular. I also recommend you to use it. As I said, it will help you to generate a pair, so-called rapid pair keys. And after that, you can send notification to your push subscription that was stored here. I made very short explanation, but I hope it was clear enough. I also had to spend quite some time myself to figure out how it actually works. but please, you're welcome with questions if something is still not clear. Also, interesting thing about ServiceWorkers that I recommend you also to check. Go via this link in Chrome browser. You can see how many ServiceWorkers from different sites are already registered in your browser and doing something in background. And now the final part about framework, how framework helps us to use ServiceWorkers. If you speak about Angular, Angular has its CLI that helps you to add ServiceWorkers to your application just in one command. So you run ng add and ServiceWorkers, and in general, progressive web application PWA concept is there with manifest file with possibility to install like a mobile application. What it does under the hood, it installs specific service worker package, updates your index.html file, obviously change the config file, and also add specific module to your main module and manifest file, as I said. And already after this command, your application can work offline. Offline in a read mode, obviously, if somebody tries to edit something, it will be not possible without internet, but still, for some blog documentation or something where it's more oriented like a static site that is users are mostly get content, that's super convenient. For example, in your documentation website uses ServiceWorkers that I discovered during my long flight. I opened the site where there was no internet and it was possible to work with. So also out of this command, cache that we looked before is provided out of box. And it's good also to understand what's being cached and how to set up it. So first of all, if you run it on an initial project, all the assets, including index.html file, will be cached. And you can also see it in web developer tools. If you go to application, and from the left, you have your cache storage. And in your cache storage, you see different versions of your service worker cache. And here you can see all the files. It's very convenient from web developer tools. Also, you have your service worker config, and you can tweak some parts. Let's look at the most interesting one. It's about installation mode and update mode. And both can be either prefetched or lazy. Prefetched means that you try to get greedily as much content as we have, or lazy one when you try to load content when it was already requested. So here we have an example also of loading external resources. It's also possible when you specify a direct link, direct external link. Also, it's possible to cache not only assets, but also HTTP request. Config has data groups here, and data group as such interface definition, where you can specify what exactly, what would be the strategy, should it be fresh or more performance, so we rely on cache. Also specify things like age of cache. Yeah, that's what I said about performance. And here example of data group when we want to cache random.org API. Speaking about updates that are also quite important to make smooth experience for your users when new version of ServiceWorkers is deployed. For Angular ServiceWorkers, a ServiceWorkers service is provided, so you can just inject it and subscribe to updates. And when update happened, you can notify your user and after softly refresh the page to make sure that service worker is updated. Push notifications. Well, push notification, the most complex part we just discussed about setting up push notification subscription. But when it's done, the framework part is very easy. So you also should subscribe, create subscription, get subscription object, somehow send subscription object to the server. And after you just need to subscribe to push notifications. You can subscribe also to push, like, in addition, you can subscribe to push notification clicks. And that's it. If you have any questions, please now or
or later on all your channels.
Yeah, or later. That's why I specified my Twitter handler, and you're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Stepan. That was a very useful presentation. Definitely. I have one question for you. What was the last bug you fixed in a service worker?
The last bug was exactly about caching. I found that my old application that was cached completely, so it was not possible even to update service worker. So I updated completely the whole application. It's real production application. It's my pet project, but it's real production application. I migrated from one framework to another framework. I created new version of ServiceWorkers. But still, my users, well, because I used web developer tools, I saw new version. And I was confident that my users of my application, see also new version. But suddenly I realized, looking at Google Analytics, I realized that they're still using old version of application. For me, it was such a surprise. And yeah, I had to do a trick. It's super important that the cache file, service worker file, has the same name. Only in this case, if you update it, browser will, even if it was cached, browser will try to load new version. Otherwise, it will just ignore. So I had to first to upload new version of service worker file with the same name, and inside was empty file, only a function to clean up the cache, all the cache. And only after I managed to fix this issue and basically move all the users to a new version of the application. That was a surprise for me.
Thank you for sharing this with us. I think it's very common situation.
Yeah, I knew about that. I might have some problems, but I didn't see it for that specific case. So, and I mentioned the YouTube channel. I described in all the details the situation and how to deal with it, how to fix the cache thing. So you're also welcome to check it.
We have one question from the audience, from Vitotas. Can service workers be used for anything else than caching? For example, some complex calculations.
Well, you can use service workers for whatever you want. And sometimes that's why I suggested you to check all the service workers that are already installed in your browser. Maybe some of them are doing mining for some services, and you even don't know somewhere in background. But normally, service workers are not used, not created to do parallel computations, and that's what web workers is used for. So that's the short answer. I provided the most used case for caching, but here you are limited only with your imagination. I know a lot of different interesting things implemented with service workers. For example, a lot of code sandboxes where you can play with the code and run code like online. They implemented with service workers, so you can use this sandbox even offline, and with mechanism that service worker will take the code, somehow transpile it, and you'll get the output inside iframe.
Thank you so much. There are no more questions from the audience. Everyone, make sure to follow Stepan because there are very useful insights and examples on his channels. Thank you, Stepan, for your talk. For me, it was very useful. I opened my service workers on the browser. The scroll is in infinite, so I'll need to do some cleaning, apparently. Thank you so much.
Well, at least to know what's
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, I wasn't aware so far. That's kind of a bad thing for me being a tester. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Stepan. It was a great talk. Everyone, see you in the next one.
This is all we got. Remember the revolution in our minds. This is all we got.
Lock me out of this life institution. I am angry and I am illusions. Yes, I hate, but it's not a solution. Try my best, but I'm just a human. Oh, we don't need to say we're sorry. We don't need to worship heaven's stars.